I want to give you an example so you understand how God is running everything and how we have the freedom of choice. Suppose I had a temporary ability of traveling in the future, let's say for 1 week. I travel in the future and I see what happened to you, what decision you made. Okay, so I traveled all the way to next Friday and I saw exactly where you went, what kind of decision you made. Now back to this Friday, I'm giving you a choice to go to New York or to California. So I want to give you a choice to go to either New York or California. So I'm giving you a choice. You're going to freely choose California or New York for your trip. But I already know, see, because I traveled in time this 1 week and I know that you decided to go to California. So even though I'm giving you the freedom of choice, I know exactly what you're going to do and where you're going. But it is much more than this. I don't think we can really understand it. God runs everything. And this is the condition. This is a quality of God. And if you don't know this quality, you don't know God and you don't believe in God. And this is what the Quran means by all these verses. When Satan inflicts disasters, diseases, cancer on people, Satan is doing this in accordance with God's law. And we see this in the Quran. I remind you, for example, of the disciples of Jesus when they demanded a feast from the sky. And God said, okay, I'm going to send it down, but if any of you disbelieves, I will punish him severely, more than anybody that I ever punished. Now you know that the punisher will really be Satan, but God, this is God's law. When they disbelieve, they step out of God's kingdom, then Satan will inflict the damage, but God is doing everything. So even the actions of Satan are under God's control. God is running everything. God will not be a God if he wasn't running everything. So this is a quality of God that we must recognize. And we're going to commemorate it. This is in our own language, in English. And you drive your car and you say God is running everything. And you look at everything and you say God is running everything. Because this is the condition of belief in God. The Quran says very clearly, when something good happens to you, it is from God. When something bad happens to you, it is from you. But God is running everything. God created the fire. You can use it to cook a steak, from a raw steak to a delicious cooked steak, unless you like it raw. But you can also put your finger in that fire and burn your finger. So God created the fire to be in your service, but if you choose to put your finger in it and suffer, then this is from you, not from God. But it is God's law that made the fire as burning. If you put your finger in it, it burns. It's God's law. It's one of the physical laws. There are many invisible laws. Like if you disobey God, if you go drink, for example, it's exactly like putting your finger in the fire, but the punishment is not as visible. You can be sure you'll pay. It's just like that, like the fire and putting your finger in it. Alcohol and drinking it. Drugs and taking them. Adultery and committing it. All these things, there are laws that God's laws govern them. And the punishment, the physical, the fire, putting your finger in it, the punishment for God for the sins are exactly in the same way, but they're not as visible. They're just as painful, if not worse. And this explains all the problems we see in the world. The people breaking God's law and paying the price, just like putting their finger in the fire. What is our role? What do we do? God is doing everything. We do only one thing, one decision, to be with God or not. After that, God takes over. But we are absolutely free in that decision. To submit is already done. And the choice, our choice, is to willingly submit or unwillingly submit. And those people who don't believe in God out there, they are submitting to God except unwillingly. I mean, they can't control the number of beats of their heart, for example. I mean, that's one of the visible things. But God runs everything. When Reagan decides to agree with the Russians on limiting nuclear weapons, he's not deciding anything. He's just like Joseph's brothers. He thinks he's deciding to meet with the Russians, or vice versa. But God runs everything. We know also that the angels are as free as we are, from the incident where Satan refused to obey God and bow down before Adam. God wants his creatures to be free as far as that decision is concerned, until the day of judgment. The eternal day of judgment, there's no more. We'll see everything, and we'll submit. Everybody will submit, including the dwellers of hell. It turns out that if we believe that anybody is doing anything, this is shirk. This is idol worship. You're putting somebody who's doing something with God next to God. It negates the idea that God runs everything. So if you think anybody is doing anything, I mean, this is, by definition, is shirk, idolatry. This is why we're going to remind ourselves, against Satan's ideas. We're going to always say, God runs everything. You're going to do it for a while, and then you'll forget, like I forget. So I'm going to keep after me and after you, and we're going to repeat that. I'm going to remind you, and you remind me, and we will always continuously, until every cell in our body is declaring God is running everything. Because this, like I said, sheds a whole new light on submission, the idea of submission. And this sign out there on the wall, happiness is submission to God, is a profound sign. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye. You're going to be perfectly happy. And this dhikr, where God runs everything, is going to help you into total submission. Because anytime you start to complain or object, you're going to remind yourself, God runs everything. I'm complaining against God. I'm complaining from God is doing this, so I'm complaining. I don't like it. Sometimes we turn into complainers, and we have to catch ourselves. Complainers will complain when things are good. They'll complain when things are bad. They get into a rut, and they'll complain continuously. That's objection. That's the opposite of submission. There's a good example of decisions. The main issue of the Muslim perspective, we decided to print a certain number, and we said, okay, we're going to get to these Muslim organizations. They don't deserve the Muslim perspective anyway, so we're going to skip one, do one and skip one. So we'll send only Muslim perspectives to half of them. And okay, we made a decision, right? We make decisions, but God makes the decision, and God's decision prevails. So the next day, the press, they call me and they say, guess what? We made a mistake. I say, what? Should we change the page? They printed one page on the wrong side. So they have to do it over for nothing. So we ended up with a large number of Muslim perspectives anyway, and we had to send the perspective to everybody. But this is an example of deciding, right? We decided to eliminate these names, but God decided, no, you're going to send it to every single one of them. God runs everything.